Hello, my friends. It's 2 o'clock and it is snowbound outside. I was at my house, which is, I don't know, over the hill in the dale here. And I was thinking to myself, well, it's a snowy day. There's probably going to be 18 inches of snow. Maybe not, maybe 12. And I thought, well, maybe I'll just take a day off from the chat. It's snowy. And I thought, wait a minute, we're all going to be homebound today, so why not go live with the pastor's chat to check in and say hello? So here I am. Hello. Come here, pup. So my dog Riley was my guide through the blizzard. Say hi, Riley. She loves the snow, and so she forged the path through the snow and helped to get me here. There were times I couldn't really see, but see what a devoted pastor I am. Truthfully, I was just looking to get out in the fresh air and come here and do some of what we do, right? What better day to do some reflection about how we are and how we're doing, how we're faring in the world. I hope that your heat is on, and your electricity is still on, and that you're okay. If you need help, I guess if your electricity wasn't on, you wouldn't be seeing this unless you're looking at it on a battery-operated phone. But anyway, if you need help, give me a shout. Send me a text. Send me an email, I guess, is really the only way I can tell you I'm available. And try to respond. So, season of Epiphany goes on for another 2 weeks. Even though we're into the month of February now, we have this coming Sunday, and then one more, and then Lent. And so yesterday, in my study through the week and my thinking about the text that I preached on yesterday, I came to another awareness about myself, about how I am, about why my life tends to take the pattern that it does. And I thought maybe I would share it as a kind of epiphany about me. So at one point in listening to the text and trying to listen to the text, Jesus goes into the synagogue. He sees a man who has an unclean spirit, whatever that means. And he doesn't ignore him. He doesn't walk past him. He doesn't say, nothing. He turns to him and engages him directly. And this is a man who the town had gotten used to and had been walking past and ignoring and protecting themselves from for years. That's just the way it was. That's this synagogue in this town. We have this man. And that's how he behaves. And he comes to synagogue and, well, there you have it. We usually just hope that he'll be quiet. But when Jesus turns to him, and the spirit within him, however you want to think about this is Mark's creativity. Don't build your idea of other worlds and how our world on this. It's a way of talking about what he was experiencing. The man seems to be possessed by something. And the good news of that is that in Jesus' way of seeing things, he recognized the man's behavior, even some of the things he said, weren't him. They were coming from his lips, but he was in service to something else. You don't have to go off into super Marvel Comics kind of world to believe and understand what Jesus was doing. And what happens is when he turns his attention, Jesus' attention to the man, the voice speaks and says, "What do you have to do with me? What do you, Jesus, have to do with What do you have to do with me and us and this?" And Jesus' answer is everything. Everything. My words. Jesus says, "Come out of that man. You have him in a cage, set him free." So, other than re-preaching my whole sermon, I said I wrote down, when I was doing my studying, I wrote down a sentence that has stayed with me as my epiphany for today. And it was this: the way things are is not a clue for how they ought to be. The way things are is not a clue for how they ought to be. Now that sentence, when I first wrote it down, it moved inside me and it went all through the recesses of who I am. And I realized that it's something you could put on my tombstone. It's why I reach for change in the world. It's why I struggle sometimes and get myself in trouble around issues that have been decided for years and years and years. Marriage is a union of one man and one woman. And in the very fiber of who I am, that's just the way it has always been. But that is not yet a clue for how it ought to be. For the word ought to be opens us to adventure, to learn, to understand human sexuality in a new way, and to recognize that that's how we did it because that's how we understood it then. But when we understand it differently, when we see things in a different light, when epiphanies happen and we understand the world differently, then ought to be begins to move into our lives, and it causes us a lot of stress, especially if someone else is bringing it to us. It causes the stirring of the pot. We talk about keepers of the status quo. The Church of Jesus Christ, in all of its perspective, in all of its range of liberal, conservative, whatever you want, is basically an institution that works very hard to keep status quo, because status quo tends to provide for a peaceful life. It tends to provide for, less up and down and less wildness in life, less chaos. And I don't know why, but my DNA, my life has always been to talk when I experience the way things are. Something deep in me is stirred with a sense of injustice. That is not, I don't care how long it's been that way, it is not right. Then I can't trade the love for predictability and the way things are for ignoring the way they ought to be. So I'm usually pressing that boundary. Now, just like everybody else, I go to the scripture and find reinforcements and justification for who I am. So I see Jesus walk into that temple. He could have walked by that man and endorsed the way everyone treated people with mental illness or epilepsy or whatever it was. Jesus could have simply just baptized the way we deal with people like that and then moved on, take out the scroll, preach, and move back, and just ignored the yelling in the comments of a man deemed possessed by an evil spirit. He could have done it. I'm telling you, hundreds of scribes and Pharisees and teachers have done that before him. And why is that story in the beginning of the Gospel of Mark? Because Jesus didn't. He didn't. He turned to the man and started a conversation with him. And as a result of the conversation, the man's illness was cured. I don't know. I know it's an oversimplification to think that no matter who reads that, you're going to see that. I see it that way because that's my DNA. I'm hardwired for that. That's why in my role in church, I've always been I've always been more on a kind of cutting edge to push for change. I've always been one who has tried to see further and better understandings of what we already believe. I'm very conservative. I am very conservative. I'm conservative in terms of where we get our theology from. We ought to deal with the Bible. We should. I believe it's the best and brightest witness to Jesus Christ and everything that he stood for. I believe that completely. But when we go to read it, I'm determined that we should read carefully to make sure that we hear what it says and open our minds in the spirit of epiphany to hear, oh my goodness, what really took place and what Jesus is trying to say. I've often said that one of the reasons I'm a Presbyterian and a member of the PCUSA is that the Presbyterian Church prided itself hundreds of years ago to believe that it had determined a process for discerning God's will. Yeah, that's right, for discerning, for clearing the smoke away and being able to say with some level of confidence, we believe this is God's will. But in the true spirit of the Presbyterian Church, reformed and always reforming, when we do it right, we say we believe with all of our hearts that this is God's will for now. Because we know the way life unfolds is that our understanding of what God's will is in this moment cannot be maximized to say this is how we should hold on to the understanding of God's will. So, people say I'm pastor in a liberal denomination. Only liberal in that sense. Now, maybe that's everything. Liberal in open-mindedness toward what is God saying now. What mistakes did we make when we were discerning and sifting through, even sifting through the Bible to know what God is saying to us or what God wants from us? Constantly going back and revisiting it and looking again. Because the way things are is not necessarily a clue to the way they ought to be. That's my epiphany today. Not that it's a new process for me, but finding the words to say it, to discover it, and to believe that, yes, I don't know, the things I do believe, I don't believe lightly. I feel passionate about them. So that means that whatever I passionately believe now, I have to also passionately take back when some new information comes along. The way things are, it's not even a guarantee of peaceful living. It's not even an avoidance of chaos. It's not, ultimately. Because life moves on. And if our pathway to peace is a pathway that says we'll just always do what we did yesterday, we'll ultimately find out that won't work because we are following God. And God is moving on. It's a journey. So how are you today? How are you today? How are you in this experience of being suspended between everything we know and everything we think we know how to do, and then what brings along today and we say, oh, I don't know what I ought to do. I don't know how I ought to do this next step. One of the answers behind some of my conversations today are that now it's a snowstorm, right? We've encountered these before. We've even had snowstorms with 18 inches before. I don't know. That always brings a certain calm, a beauty, not to people who have snow car wrecks or who lose their power. Certainly there's the potential for a lot of danger in this, but this feels like old hat to me compared to this pandemic and everything that is coming with it. When you hear on the news that the suicide rate related to isolation and the breakdown of socialization of people, of young people and older people, is exploding. Pause for a moment and realize what you're hearing. It's real. I tell you it's real because it's touched my life. Just in the past 2 weeks, it's touched my life 3 separate times. And not suicide, but people who are losing control over how to keep on going. Discouragement and despair where they've never felt it before. Old people, older people, people older than me, and younger people feeling the shell tightening around them. Fortunately, the ones I'm dealing with looked for help and got it, are getting it. But listen, out there in the world, my goodness, the pressure is on us, my friends. And it's not just the COVID. Is COVID real, or isn't it? Is it a government manufactured crisis to take control over the population? Is the vaccine healthy, or is it a modified way of just, kind of, again, test to see if we really have control? Do we know the facts? Are people dying from the vaccine? Are people not dying? Is the vaccine effective? Do we know? It's a crisis of knowing. It's a crisis of knowing that has had gasoline and flame thrown on it by political parties for their own separate gain, exploiting people's fear and lack of knowledge. We all have limited knowledge, but we are victimized when people prey on our lack of knowledge or our inability to find out facts and truth, and they blow into the wind all kinds of things that are, it's not just that they're wrong, it's that they're not helpful, and they prey on the fears that we have. A pandemic, a worldwide pandemic, raises a fear factor even among people who deny it, all by itself. I guess I'm back to talking about it because when I get off into another direction and I feel good, oh good, I've put the pandemic behind me and whatever, and then you can't. It's in everything we're doing. It's how I got here talking to you in this format. It's the answer to the question, how am I? I'm surviving, I'm doing well, I actually feel pretty good today. But I live in a world that is oppressed by a pandemic disease that is also creating a pandemic of information and trust and a pandemic of fear. So I'm grateful for whatever glimpse of a new insight I can carry around today. I've been thinking about it all day. That's who I am. I'm just not one of those people who believes that the way things are is a clue, is a sign from God about the way things ought to be. And that God has a right to introduce into our world that sense of how things ought to be. And the measure of that is love. That's how I know it's from God. If it's pursued in a further and deeper understanding of love. The world is not really all that well structured in love. It's not. So we have a lot of reforming to do, and I'm ready for some of it. I try to be. Anyway, I hope you're sitting next to a fire. If not, maybe a space heater that's keeping your feet warm. And that today you'll have a cup of coffee or tea or a glass of water or something that helps you to sit back, take a big deep breath and say, so how am I today? And when you think of those things, send those thoughts along to me, either in actuality in an email or just in the thoughts. Release them into the air. How are you? I hope your life is good. I hope you're holding on. I hope if you're dealing with grief that you're managing. Give it its due. And I hope you're finding people who are with you and caring for you. If you're not feeling well today, if you're sick, I'm going to just say a prayer for you to get better. Whatever is at your feet, at your heels, nipping at your heels, or for whatever is carrying you along in terms of joy. God bless you. I pray for you, I care for you, and I will see you tomorrow, as long as the snow doesn't get so high that I can't get in the door of the church. Today, right now, it's 3/4 of the way up my shins. So my little buddy here, Riley, and we're going to make our journey back to the house now. And I'll be thinking about you and praying God's blessing for you. Goodbye, my friends.